Chapter 5 Carton CO. A shot of the Traxxer's cafeteria can be seen. Most of the crew is sitting on classroom chairs set around dusty wooden tables. Aird walks into the room and sits next to Max. Zoe, who is standing before everybody else, turns around and hands Meinel his notebook, which she had been holding a second ago. She asks for everyone's attention and tells everybody what she's going to tell them is very important info. Everybody goes silent and turns to listen. Zoe says that all of the people here are, as of today, a part of the Broadheart Unity's arsenal of tides and members of the 24th contracting group, the Foghound Squadron. She states that as a contracting group, they are to do jobs provided not just by the Broadheart but also by its smaller private companies in times of peace. She explains that as they know, if conflict does arise somewhere in the Sunken Quarter, the Broadheart should supply them with all the things needed for warfare, at which point they are on standby in case of an emergency, in which case they act as any of the standard combat squadrons. Zoe tells everybody that the Foghounds currently only have 3 pilots as they don't have the manpower to maintain more than 3 aircraft at once. Max quietly asks Aird if he has seen the other 2 pilots, and Aird says he hasn't, looking around the table to spot someone new. A short man who's sitting next to them with a strangely combed haircut quietly tells them that he's Hill, one of the 2 pilots, and says Tran will actually be flying one of their better planes too. Aird is surprised and Max says he guesses they'll be keeping him as a weapon officer or bombardier of some sort if he's not on the pilot list. Aird jokes that Zoe might not even know Max can fly planes. Hill also points to a darker skinned woman they had not seen before, who was sitting pretty far back, and says that's Danny and that she can technically fly too. Zoe tells everybody who arrived later in the day to stand up. Hill stands up from his seat and so does another man, short-haired and fairly annoyed by his situation. She introduces the 2 as Hill and Mark respectively, saying Hill is their old squadron's heavy aircraft pilot and that Mark is their new repairman. She says that more will join soon, but first they need to get their operations up and running. She states that training is starting tomorrow morning, first with just a physical check on a basic obstacle course, and then a parachuting exercise. Max whispers to Flank how she's right to teach them about basic combat early on, with running and jumping from burning wrecks as their first 2 exercises. Flank quiets himself after starting to chuckle. Zoe says that from tomorrow on though, for the next few days it's almost all gonna be about flying and repairing the squadron's aircraft till they are ready to take on a contract. Before dismissing everyone, Zoe asks for Aird and Max to stay for a bit. Once everyone leaves, she tells the 2 to hand over their surface uniforms for safety reasons. Max asks what kind of safety, and Zoe explains that every lowlife who spots them with it will try to mug them for it. Aird starts to take off his uniform and asks why anybody would even want one this bad, so Zoe explains that people trying to pass off as surface pilots will pay a fortune for one. She says that even if she's a little desperate to get her squadron running, you can get into a higher-end flight group fairly easily if you can prove you were trained by the surface. Zoe takes out her survival knife and explains there is an easy way to fix this issue while they wait for everyone's new uniforms to arrive from Perm. Aird asks where Perm is, and Zoe corrects herself and says Crystal, saying that it's the same thing. Aird is now slightly annoyed that Max was right. Aird's and Max's attention shifts back to Zoe as she slides the knife to the inside of the left pocket of Aird's uniform and slowly cuts away at the precise stitches until the whole pocket is roughly cut off of the jacket. Max is shocked and asks what this accomplishes. Zoe tells him to give her his uniform too. As she is cutting his left pocket off too, she explains that his uniform will be fairly hard to fix without precise machine stitching, and that it sends a message that the original owner doesn't want it sold. She explains that no surface pilot who just got stranded and was looking for a job would be wearing a uniform with just its left pocket ripped. Max is still confused and asks why she'd do that. They were stranded 2 days ago themselves after all. She smiles and looks at him as she finishes off the last few stitches and tells him he doesn't seem to be looking for a job anymore. The scene immediately switches to the double bunk bed barracks in which Max, Aird, Marion and Hill are now resting. Max is already fast asleep and Hill is reading a book next to his petroleum lantern. Aird asks the other 2 if they are going to sleep soon. Hill nods to the side and Marion also tells him he's having trouble falling asleep. Aird turns away for a second but then turns back on his top bunk to ask what the Carton Company is. Marion tells him the Carton Contracts Company is like a black market business but then corrects himself and explains it's more of a brand. He says they are located all across the quarter but mostly in the south, and their main deal is to lots of packaging and old paper with air marines and sneak all kinds of produce in between all that cardboard. Aird nods but Marion says he kind of poorly described it, since the company even has an army of sorts, and that they do all kinds of stuff, debt bonding, even human trafficking and slavery along with robbery. He adds that it's just their smuggling operations that their name comes from. Aird asks if he means they are like bandits or pirates, but Marion tells him they have that too here in the Downfall, but those are all smaller. Either boarding crews, which board warships in hopes of getting cargo or hostages, or regular traveling groups of robbers. He stops to think for a bit and explains it's kind of like the group he and the others ran into before they found him and Max. Aird thanks him for the explanation. Hill stops reading his book and wonders why he's asking this. Aird tells him that Tran told him the girl from before probably worked for them. Hill laughs a bit and says that back in the old squad, Tran always used to assume people he didn't like worked for Cart & Co. So even though neither he nor Tran saw that girl, that likely explains the situation. Aird nods in confirmation, but just then, Tran bashes the door open, bangs on its side with his closed fist twice, sending Max, who was previously asleep, into a fit of panic, before telling everyone to go to sleep immediately since they need to wake up in time for breakfast tomorrow. Post-chapter. A still shot of a boy with a Russian flag-colored winter hat is shown as he stands between two people and judgmentally looks at an old black Yugo car, which had just pulled up from the gravel road stretching behind the dry grassy bank of the small river. Another shot of the boy is shown as he is still looking at the car. A black-haired person with a completely blanked out and censored face pulls the shirt sleeve of the boy with the hat and asks him what's taking the people in the car so long. He wants to answer, but just then another boy of a similar build with slightly less light hair climbs out of the back seat of the car, pulling a heavy backpack out with him along with a solid luggage bag. He turns to the open door and speaks in Russian to his parents who are sitting up front, saying that he'll see them in a few days. An older man with very bright brown hair and a wild smile waves to them from the front passenger seat. Just then, the woman on the driver's seat starts driving away. The wide-smiled man manages to lower the window and shout over to the boy who just exited, calling him Kitko and telling him to call him in the evening. The boy who exited the car waits for it to leave and apologizes, saying his mom was convinced there was no need for her and his dad to exit too, since everything had already been discussed. The winter hat boy is shown to be standing next to not only the kid with the blanked out face but also the older girl in the long shirt and overalls, both of whom are looking at the boy from the car in curiosity. The winter hat boy is about to say who he assumes the newcomer to be, but the boy from the car shakes his hand and tells him immediately that his name's Nikita, and that he came here from Kuybyshev in the Novosibirsk Oblast to study here in Yasnogorsk's mechanic school. The blanked-out-faced kid immediately calls Nikita Kitko, and he's clearly a bit annoyed by this, but he does not say anything. A short silence ensues, so Nikita makes sure he's really talking to the right people, which the girl in the overalls confirms. Winter Hat Boy picks Nikita's luggage up and tells him they should go up to show him the house. The group of four is now walking up some packed dirt stairs, blocked off with vertical wooden planks to stop rain erosion from turning the large stairway into a bumpy ramp. Nikita asks the girl if she's the owner and she confirms, saying that her name's Anne. Nikita jokingly asks what she's doing in the middle of Siberia since her name's not from here, and she replies in poorly spoken Russian that she's still adapting to the place, but that she can cook better than his babushka. Nikita laughs and says that he'll see about that. Anne seemingly remembers the other two haven't been introduced, so she explains the guy in the back is Blank, pointing to the one with the censored face, her lips not making any sound as she speaks his name. Blank waves to Nikita as a joke and calls him Kitko, which still annoys him a bit. Anne says that he has lived here with her since she moved, but that he doesn't know any Russian, so they can make fun of him in their language. Nikita then turns to the winter hat boy who's been looking at him the whole time while carrying the heavy luggage bag, and tells him he must be Anton. Anton nods and confirms, awkwardly saying his surname's Haridiev. He says that he's glad to have another person to talk with and tells him he'll show him around the mechanic school when he gets in his class. Nikita tells him that works, but he should just make sure to. Suddenly Arid wakes up in his bed in the barracks, breathing heavily with sweat on his forehead. He looks around, but everybody else is asleep.